morning, guys. Let's get into exposing the expositions of 1851 to 1915. And this is the revised 2021 edition from its 2019. That's by Howdy Mikowski, the Court of Honors in Chicago, or as y'all like to say, Chicago. Now, I want to discuss this, but when we go live, okay, when they, lighten up, I'll go ahead and explain the statue. Before moving on, I must make mention of the International Exhibition of Paris in 1889. So vast was the scale, and yet so artistic the design, that it became the wonder of the civilized nations of Earth. And by all it was conceded that never before had been witnessed such a combination of the grand and beautiful in science, art, and industry. Interspersed among the main structures were groups representing foreign lands, such as a street in Algiers, a Turkish village, the minarets of Tunis, and the dwellings of New Caledonia. Now, while the art galleries form one of the most interesting features of this effort, it surpassed, as I have said, all its predecessors as a great international exposition with a larger scope and variety of exhibits than had ever before portrayed the phases of human industry. There were probably but few who could examine, and fewer still who could appreciate in their entirety the treasures and attractions of this great spectacular display. Now, to make the circuit merely of the grounds and buildings, the former occupying 173 and the latter 75 acres, required a journey of 15 miles, and to form an intelligent estimate of their contents needed months of close observation and study. Recall this fair happened just 18 years, y'all, after much of Paris was supposedly destroyed in 1871 by the Germans during the Franco-Prussian War. Now, the great building of this fair was the Eiffel Tower, 894 feet in height, still one of the attractions of Paris today. However, it does not now look like it did when it was first built. In early construction photos, what can be seen are some rounded structures along the first level. These could be seen in photos taken during the 1900 exposition, as well. Then a decade later, they vanished. So what are these? They were part of the original design, so why remove them? I think they may have been part of making the tower its full original purpose as part of an energy-generating device, a device that for some reason, after the World's Fairs, was shut off. I will discuss the towers for energy in the upcoming chapters, but we must look ahead to the great expositions after Paris and the cities that held them, to recall where this investigation is headed, mind you. As in example A, were the buildings were already there from long before and just needed to be refurbished and or restored? Or B, was there or was a technology at the time that is not reported or believed, one we may just be rediscovering today? Pretty awesome, huh? So tomorrow I'll go ahead and we'll start chapter 3, which is planning and building of Chicago. And we'll first take a look at the Illinois building at Chicago Exposition of 1893. Now you got to remember, this is 1800s, okay? And some people say, well, look at the great castles up. The majority of people really didn't know how to build anything. And we'll get into that tomorrow, okay? I'll put this over here. Now I want to read a little bit of Demonology by King James I. And this is the preface to the reader. Excuse me. The fearful aboundings at this time in this country of these detestable slaves of the devil, the witches or enchanters, hath moved me, beloved reader, to dispatch in post this following treatise of mine, not in any wise, as I protest, to serve for shew of my learning and engine, but only moved of conscience to praise thereby so far as I can to resolve the doubting hearts of many, both that such assaults of Satan are most certainly practiced, and that the instruments thereof merits most severely to be punished against the damnable opinions of two principally in our age, whereof the one called Scott, an Englishman, is not ashamed in public print to deny that there can be such a thing as witchcraft, and so maintains the old error of the Sadducees in denying of spirits, and the other called, Waivers, a German position, sets out a public apology for all these craft folks, whereby procuring for their impudent, he plainly bewares himself to have been one of that profession, and for to make this treaty the more pleasant and facile, I have put it in form of a dialogue, which I have divided into 3 books. The first speaking of magi in general, and necromancy, which the word negro or negroid come from, in special. The second of sorcery and witchcraft, and the third containers a discourse of all these kinds of spirits, a specter that appears and troubles persons. Now, together with a conclusion of the whole work, my intention is this labor is only to prove 2 things, as I have already said. The one, that such devilish arts have been and are, as the other, as in existence, what exact trial and severe punishment they merit, and therefore reason I have, what kind of things are possible to be performed in these arts, and by what natural causes they may be. Not that I touch every particular thing of the devil's power, for that were infinite, for if it were infinite, but only to speak scholastically. Now, since this cannot be spoken in our language, I reason upon genius leaving species and differential to be comprehended therein, / as for example, speaking of the power of magicians in the 1st book and 6th chapter, I say that they can suddenly cause be brought into them all kinds of dainty dishes by their familiar spirits, and since as a thief he delights to steal, and as a spirit he can subtly and suddenly enough transport the same, spirits that is. Now, under this genius may be comprehended all particulars, depending thereupon, such as the bringing wine out of a wall, and in parenthesis, as we have heard of oft to have been practiced in, and such others with particulars are sufficiently proved by the reasons of the general, and such like in the 2nd book of witchcraft in special, and 5th chapter say. Now I say and prove by diverse arguments that witches can, by the power of their master, cure or cast on diseases. Now by these same reasons that proves their power by the devil of diseases in general, is as well prove their power in special, as of weakening the nature of some men, hearts and all that, to make them vulnerable or unable for women, and making it to abound in others more than the ordinary course of nature would permit now, and such like in all other particular sicknesses. But one thing I will pray thee to observe in all these places where I reason upon the devil's power, which is the different ends of scopes, that God as the first cause, and the devil as his instrument and second cause, shoots in all these actions of the devil as God's hangman. For where the devil's intentions in them is ever perished, either the soul or the body, or both of them, that he is so permitted to deal with, God, by the contrary, draws over out of that evil glory to himself, either by the wrecks of the wicked in his justice, or by the trial of the patient, an amendment of the faithful being weakened up, with that rod of correction. Having thus declared unto thee, then, my full intention in this treaty, thou wilt easily excuse, I doubt not, though, as well my permitting to declare the whole particular rights and secrets of these unlawful arts, as also their infinite and wonderful practices, as being neither of them pertinent to my purpose, and the reason whereof is given in the hinder end of the first chapter of the third book. And who likes to be curious in these things, he may read, if he chooses, and if he will hear of their practices. Wow. Bodevins, what is that? I don't even know what the word is, people. I'm serious. But it's Bodevins, Demonology, collected with greater diligence than written with judgment, together with their confessions that have been at this time apprehended, if he would know that have been the opinion of the aunts. I don't know these words. Oh, wow. Anyway, the audiences. Concerning their power, he shall see it well described by Hyperides and Hemmings, to late German writers, besides innumerable other Neotric theologies that writes largely upon that subject, and if he would know that are the particular rights, curiosities of these black arts, which is both vicarious and perilous, he will find it in the fourth book of Cornelius Agrippa, and in, I don't know this, Vviervs, it's not what it says, verses whom of spake, and so wishing my pains in this treatise, beloved reader, to be effectual in arming all of them that readers the same against these above mentioned your errors, and recommending my goodwill to thy friendly exception, I bid thee heartily farewell. Now you must understand, somebody might be watching me read this and see how well I can read this. I can actually read it very well, because you will not be able to read this. Screenshot it if you may. You will not be able to read this. Screenshot it if you may. Again, you will not be able to read this. For those who may be poignant to something else. And even though I am a little rusty, it's not braggart rights. They're starting to stand out, the words that are. And tomorrow, we will get into Demonology, the first book. Now, I believe I had read some of this, but not all. And I really appreciate you all taking the time for here around the 15-minute mark to listen to this. Tomorrow morning, I had started reading this. I'm doing 2 parts. I'll put it together, and we'll get into this because you know I'm reading a few chapters. So I appreciate y'all taking the time, and I will see y'all in the AM in a video, of course. Y'all have a wonderful, wonderful night.